Thank you very much. And if I can invite onto our panel as well, Rachel Smith, the youth representative that the Minister's just mentioned, and also Jackie Keenan, the project officer for UNESCO Biosphere Isle of Man. And thank you for that informative presentation as well, because there's so much going on and so much passion for this. It's great. In fact, do you know what? I'm going to grab a seat and come and sit with you. All friendly around here, so super. Well, thank you all of you for your time, and also we've got a few questions coming in, and a number of the audience have stayed as well, and I'm sure they'll want to put some questions to you. I'm just going to start with you, Claire, if I may, just by asking you really, how does the Isle of Man balance that environmental conversation with the need for energy development as a UNESCO biosphere?
It's an interesting question, but actually I think that's almost the core tenet of biosphere principles, is the necessity to have a considered and balanced approach to sustainable development. And actually it's the ability to demonstrate that our processes take into account all of the necessary considerations, rather than it being specifically a biosphere role to say you can do this or you can't do that. That just isn't how biosphere reserve status works. So it would be looking at whether our planning process has the right considerations, and some of those things would be the involvement and consultation with ecosystems, biodiversity, marine protection, environmental protection, even arboriculture. So a number of different elements that would feed into that consideration to allow a decision to be taken that is considerate and balanced.
And Jackie, if I may ask you, how long does the island retain, I mean, I think it was 2016, so how long does the island retain that biosphere status for?
Well, we can retain it for forever.
Forever?
If we play our cards right. So as Claire mentioned in the presentation, it's 2016. We have 10 years from 2016, so in 2026.
Sorry, you did say that. I did hear that, yeah.
So we're tested basically every 10 years with a periodic review, as every biosphere reserve is, to see how we're doing and to see if we deserve to be reaccredited. We are in a very strong position, but we can't be complacent about it. So we're putting things in place to make sure that we're already starting that process. And part of the process of the periodic review is looking at where we were in 2016 and what we said we were going to do, and where we are now and how we've performed against those.
So what's involved in applying for reaccreditation?
So it's that sort of how far have we come since 2016. A big part of that is going to be talking to the community of the island, all of the different stakeholders and partners, but the wider community as well, and looking at the different sectors, so business sector, the fishing and agriculture, and the communities themselves, and really finding out what the people of the Isle of Man think about our biosphere status, where they think we are, and where we think we need to be in the next 10 years as well. So it's reviewing, and it's a great opportunity to assess how we're doing, but also to plan ahead for the next 10 years as to what we want.
So as we're sitting here now, September 24, in terms of reaccreditation, cautious optimism?
Yes, I would say so.
Yeah. Okay, excellent. We didn't meet together before to discuss this, I promise you we didn't. Rachel Smith, they've been singing your praises, so why is it essential for young people to get involved in the conservation and sustainability efforts of the Isle of Man's UNESCO Biosphere Reserve?
I think it's extremely important, and something that I am encouraging more and more young people to get involved in. It's our future at the end of the day. We've got such big stake in this, and I think that as we are moving through the workforce at these early stages in our career, it's really easy for us to see where we might like to have some positive, sustainable changes, and we have the ability as young people within our biosphere to really speak up on that and to start driving those changes ourselves, which I think is really exciting. It's something that we're encouraging people to do through the new youth network that I've been building as part of my time as youth representative.
You clearly embrace it, you're clearly passionate for it. Tell me, was there, did you have a preconceived position before you came into the role? In terms of, what were your expectations, and has it surpassed them? Has it been as you expected? Has it been completely different?
I think it's been absolutely completely different, and something that I've been building myself as I've been in the role. When I started in October last year, there wasn't much of a role there for me, and I've built it up a lot throughout the year, for example, by attending conferences and different events representing young people for the Isle of Man.
Well, you mentioned conferences and events. Last week we had the Virtual Islands Summit, I suppose, as mentioned. If you had two takeaways from that, what would they be?
I think the biggest takeaway for me would be just that actually, even looking at islands in the Caribbean that have very, very different climates, we're just so similar in terms of the challenges we face as islands. And that we've certainly offered the hand of extending that conversation as a sort of second takeaway, I suppose. We've already had some early email conversation with other groups who were there at the conference, but actually we really need to draw not just on things such as the Virtual Island Summit, but actually, as Jackie and Rachel have seen by attending some of the Biosphere Network events as well. We're a member of the Euromab, we're a member of the World Biosphere Network, we're also a member of the Islands Network and the Shore, Jackie, you'll correct me on the right terminology.
The World Network of Island and Coastal Biosphere Reserves.
That is the one.
And the World Network of Mountain Reserves.
We've got one mountain. We're gonna go with it. But I think the point is that anything that we can be part of, we absolutely should be, because the information and knowledge sharing is just so fundamental and underpins everything that Biosphere is about. So if we can get in, even if it's just by a few feet, I think we're going to be there at the table.
All in. We have got a unique and distinct identity. We know that, and an outstanding natural environment. Put my teeth in. Outstanding natural environment, unique history, culture, strong sense of community. And the stability and safety that the Chief Minister alluded to when he opened this very conference this morning. Can you monetise that?
I think that, the fact that Biosphere so fundamentally underpins economy is the point, really. And it's interesting because when I talk to people who've brought businesses to the island, they're so clear about the importance that Biosphere, is to, for them, that Biosphere Reserve status possibly means more to people looking in from the outside than sometimes it does to us on the inside looking out. And I think it's really important to remind ourselves of that. So I think the fact that we recognise that if we can get nature and our sense of place right, then the economy will thrive at the top of that, I think underpins all of the key strands that sit within the island plan that absolutely mirror the strategy we have for the biosphere, and absolutely are the core tenet as to what we have here to offer as an island. And I do think sometimes you have to go outside to just remember how well we are looked upon from people from outside who look and see that we have some richness and some, cultural heritage, and, we really are really very lucky. And I think sometimes we do forget that. I'm not going to pretend everything's perfect. I think with everything there is always a place to improve and to grow. And that's what being a Biosphere Reserve is about. It's acknowledging that. It's looking at how we can improve. It's looking at how we can do that in a way that allows us to learn and focus on sustainable development as we do it.
We are going to open questions up to the floor. A lot have come in on Slido, but certainly raise your hand. Juan, thank you. I can see you. I can see Vori. In fact, Vori is probably closer. Can make our way to this gentleman here. Just while you do, just want to ask a question that's come in. What do the panel think is the biggest threat to our periodic review in 2026? Jackie?
That's a good question, isn't it? I don't think that there is any major threats to the periodic review other than if we don't do it. We are in a very strong position, as I said, and in all of the aspects, whether you're looking at the environment or culture and heritage or economy, all of those aspects we're actually doing pretty well in, particularly compared to where we were in 2016. So it's just a matter of making sure that we're following the correct processes, that we're speaking to all of the people who are on the island that the Biosphere Reserve status belongs to, and making sure that we do a really good job of evidencing what we've done.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that, one of the things that we've commissioned through the stakeholder partnership group was putting together a technical review group, and they've actually gone away and reviewed all of the documentation that sits alongside the periodic review process, and have come back with a number of different points that would be the focus areas, I suppose. Some of that's around the management plans for the established areas that we already have, and I think that's really important. So it's recognising what we've got and then making sure we have a plan to retain it, improve it if that's what it needs. But also the need for government to make sure we're underpinning everything we do with biosphere principles. And I think, for me, that island plan and the synergies that exist between the 5 E's that we've established as the biosphere strategy and the 5 strands of the island plan show clearly that actually we're underpinning everything we do with those principles of biosphere reserve status.
I want to ask, how do you measure success? What does success look like to you? But I'm going to ask Rachel first, because her answer may be very different to yours. In terms of as a biosphere nation, what would you deem to be success?
I think a successful future for our biosphere reserve would be one in which we are truly sustainable in a way where we take a lot of our food from our land, we're supporting all of our local businesses properly, and young people have had a solid voice in this and have shaped the future into what they want it to look like.
Thank you. Jackie?
I think it's one of the focuses that we're looking at the moment, which is working with the partners. It's a small team, Biosphere is a small team, and what we really want to see is what we're seeing in some of the partners already, where it's our partners who are living those biosphere values and really demonstrating them in the decision making that they're doing, and in turn that is creating a more sustainable island as a whole. Whatever sector or discipline they're working in, it's creating that biosphere thinking across the island. So really instilling that more in the partners and bringing more partners in, or even if people don't want to be partners, then encouraging that holistic approach to sustainability.
And finally?
So I suppose it's interesting. People will have seen that we've been advertising for the Biosphere Chair role, and part of that has been doing first rounds of interviews, and we asked a very similar question to those people who applied for that role, and I think it's quite telling that nobody had the same answers. What we saw was actually there are so many things that you could use as a metric by which to measure biosphere reserve status and its reach, I suppose, within our island. Some of it was around engagement, some of it was around happiness, some of it was around nature areas, some of it was around successful economy. But actually, I think it's all of those things. And what I think the biggest challenge will be as we construct the new board and we look at the metrics that we might seek to gather is trying to pin that down to a small number that we can then track against, because I think we can't measure everything. But I think, as Rachel said, the underpinning thread of sustainability will sit against all of those different concepts. But it's definitely going to be a challenge that the board's going to be taking on. So I think it was very telling just how broad. And I suppose if we asked everyone in this room, they might have different ideas as well. I don't think that's a bad thing.
That's encouraging, yeah. Thank you for your patience, sir.
No problem. Thank you very much for the presentation. And you mentioned innovation a couple of times. I wondered if you could all talk a bit about what you see as the best opportunities for innovation with regards to Biosphere. What are the best opportunities for innovation in sustainable development on the Isle of Man?
I think we've got an opportunity, as I'm sure we're all aware, that being a whole nation biosphere, and we have a lot of control over what we do or what we don't do. So we've got this real opportunity to be this living laboratory, to be a test bed for opportunities and developments of how we live into the future. So I think it can be in a myriad different ways. We've got a long history of marine research, which is close to my heart, but we can see the innovation happening in AI and digital sector at the moment. So I don't think there's one particular sector that it happens in, but I think it's important that we make the most of what we are as this whole nation biosphere, and take the opportunity to make the innovations that can then be scaled up to other biosphere reserves that we can share with the network.
Rachel?
I think something really key here will come from collaboration and the discussions that we have between each other. Another key function of the youth network that I'm building is to bring people from all different aspects of living on the Isle of Man and bringing them together to have these key discussions. Where can we work together to create something new? And I think that's going to be something really exciting that we will see coming up very soon.
Thank you, and thank you for your question. There is another one, Ju, and Ty Smith.
Guys, absolutely love what you guys are doing at Biosphere. I'm a massive supporter of it. I think it's brilliant in terms of the work that you guys have done to combine Manx culture and the environmental and sustainability issues. I think it's absolutely brilliant. Question I have is two-part. So my understanding is when we were originally granted Biosphere status, that part of that was a recommendation that Biosphere Isle of Man should be established as a department rather than part of DEFRA. With that not being the case, do we worry about the renewal process and that recommendation not being taken up? Secondly, what does this actually say about broader government's view of taking the Biosphere Isle of Man status seriously and valuing it?
There's only one place to start with that one. Thank you.
It's a great question. It's something we've talked about, I think, quite extensively. So what we have done is we've taken it out of the ecosystems and biodiversity team in DEFRA and we've pushed it so it's a direct report into the environment head. So that's the first step, I suppose, of a change, acknowledging that very point you make. But I think the point that I would then push to is that if you look at the stakeholder partnership group and you look at the partners, I think every department across government is a partner of Biosphere, and certainly a number of them are sitting at the boardroom table. We do a huge amount of work. Well, I say we, this is the role, it's Jackie really, Jackie and Brisha, going into schools and spending time, making sure that our young people are engaged. And obviously the work Rachel's doing is then really picking that up and continuing that as they come through the education system to really ensure that we're taking the voices from across all age gaps, because I think otherwise you can become almost self-fulfilling, and I don't think that's what we want. We really want blue sky thinking with Biosphere. But I can absolutely confirm DFE have a seat at the table for a number of the different agencies, as I would certainly be really disappointed if that wasn't the case. Education have people represented at the table. We have people obviously across farming, across fisheries. It's a real mix in terms of the NGOs recognised there. And there's a lot of talk around nature's seat at the table and how we embed that, I suppose, in the future Biosphere board that we're developing. So the two boards will have a very important role to play. But as we are looking at how we elevate it, but I can absolutely assure you that its current location does not prevent it from having cross-departmental talks really on a day-to-day basis.
And that's not to say that we can't improve that communication, and it's something that we're looking at. We know that there's a really good awareness of the fact that we are a biosphere reserve, and what we're trying to do at the moment is really build that understanding of what that means, and that's both in government and outside of government. So that's something that we've been talking about. How do we do that better? But in terms of the periodic review, I don't see it particularly as a risk. We are having those conversations with UNESCO UK and with the Man and Biosphere Committee as to what they're expecting from us. But as long as we can justify the current structure and framework that we have and evidence that it works for us, then I think that we're in a good position.
A question's come in here. It says most Isle of Man residents, or many Isle of Man residents, still appear confused as to what the status means. Why is it so hard to communicate? Do you find that?
Yeah, and it's not just the Isle of Man either. I think it's a worldwide issue, and it's because it is so complicated. Everyone struggles to simplify it, and I think we've done a very good job from Claire summarising it for us today and ensuring that we are aware that it encompasses everything. We're working on some different materials as part of one of my youth networks that I'm involved in at the moment to create an easy to understand way to get across the points that encompass Biosphere.
Jackie, do you encounter negative media at all with regards to Biosphere?
I haven't yet.
That's
only 3 months.
Encouraging.
Yeah, so give it time. No, I think there's generally a pretty positive reaction and positive attitude toward Biosphere. Even though even if people don't fully understand what it means, I think most people can appreciate that it seems to be a good thing. I think some of the confusion sometimes comes just from the fact that it says bio. So there's automatically, I think, a thought that it's biodiversity and nature, which is obviously one of the key components. But it is that it's conservation of biodiversity and culture. It's that sustainable development, and it is learning and research to underpin those.
How would a question in how would biosphere concerns cause any additional considerations for planning with regards to development? And indeed, I suppose following on from that, how does the government square things like that with economic strategy?
So I think that's the point around the balance. And Biosphere is absolutely focused about getting that balance, making sure that all of the considerations are in place, rather than it being the driver for saying, yes, as I say, you can do something, or no, you can't. And also I think that ties into the fact that Biosphere is something that we all own, and it's absolutely incumbent on all of us to play our part in terms of how we allow sustainable development to thrive. But as I say, Biosphere isn't the thing that's going to say, yes, you can do that, or no, you can't do that. What Biosphere will do is look at the principles and policies that underpin those decisions to make sure that a sound judgment's been used. And I think that's, as I say, in planning context, is the consultation process that we go through before a planning decision is taken, and being able to absolutely justify the decisions that are taken, why they're taken. And I think it's fair to say that anyone who's sat and read through planning officers' reports can see, it's often a balance of lots of different and sometimes competing policies, and making a judgment call at the end of that as to which one ultimately is the one that plays most in terms of how the decision might pan out. So I think you'll never get a system that's 100% perfect. There'll always be people who feel it didn't achieve the thing they were looking for. But for me, it's about that very constructive dialogue and a very balanced decision-making process.
Charlie says to become a Biosphere partner as a business appears to be a tick box exercise. What is done to police the Biosphere partners' actions? Jackie, you're getting the easy ones today, aren't you?
Thank you. It's something that we're looking at the moment. So the programme was designed to kind of be really inclusive, to allow people to come on board and to really get people involved in Biosphere and to improve that awareness of what it means. We are looking to develop that more, and so that we will be doing regular check-ins with partners, but also building that collaboration between partners and learning across that network. So we've actually got our first, you heard it here first, our first partner networking event planned, which we'll be launching next week in October, to bring as many of our partners together as possible, to start building that network and sharing, learning, and really building what it means to be a Biosphere partner. And part of that event will be looking at what does the programme look like now, what do our partners think about that programme, and how would they like to see it develop, so it really comes from the partners rather than from us.
And the second part of Charlie's question, we touched upon this, how much money has our Biosphere status brought into the Isle of Man economy? I don't expect you to know that off the top of your head.
It's a fantastic question, and it's actually one that we had a presentation from the UK network of Biosphere reserves on Friday, that there was a PhD student who'd done a research on what any of the UK designations means and what it brings in economically. So that's a framework that has been designed, and we've asked for that framework to be shared so that we can start looking at that. It's something that we'd like to really assess, looking at the different capitals that the Biosphere looks after and what that means in terms of the economy.
Super. I've got more questions, but I want to take a few from the floor. Yes, the chap... You're approaching now, June. Yes, he had the best question of the morning before, I thought. So let's see what his question in the afternoon is like.
Yes. To me, I think it's all laudable, actually. But to me, it's just a label. It's no difference than Britvic water, Schweppes water, or anything else. The Isle of Man is in a unique situation here. Why do we need to add ourselves to some other organisation and be told what to do when we really could make the Isle of Man and its waters a national park? And that's certainly unique. Would that not be a better way of selling the Isle of Man?
Well, I'll put that last question first. There's a few points in there.
Well, I'm on to it, actually. Talking about Biosphere. Why are we importing bottled water?
Well, do you know what? It's a very good question, but I don't think I can ask Rachel that one. But it's a fair question.
I think Rachel could definitely talk to the...
But the other point, yeah.
To the benefit of being part of this network, that yes, we could be a national park, and there's nothing stopping us as a biosphere reserve also making ourselves a national park. But as part of this network of the 759 biosphere reserves, but also of all the other UNESCO designations of global geoparks and the World Heritage Sites, there's a lot of learning and sharing that goes on between those biosphere reserves. And I think that you can talk about your experience at Euromab, and we're represented there by Lee Morris from the Wildlife Trust as well. And I think they both experienced what the Isle of Man is looked upon as, and as a biosphere reserve in that wider network.
Yeah, I think the term biosphere reserve is definitely, in a way, I think that. Sorry. It doesn't take away from anything, and in fact it does raise awareness of how special our island is, and further encourages us to put sustainability at the forefront of everything that we do. And also, yes, from my experiences at international conferences such as the Euromab conference this year, many other biosphere reserves around Europe and North America were incredibly jealous of what we've got here, especially, as we say, being an entire nation biosphere reserve is something that's really special, and we don't appreciate that enough, I don't think. The collaboration that can come between biosphere reserves as well is very special. For example, I'm part of the Euromab Youth Network now, and that allows us to bring the voices from youth on the Isle of Man and feed that straight up through to such higher levels, allowing us to make real positive change at an international level, not just the Isle of Man.
Yeah, I suppose I'd only add...
Is it just a label?
No, I think it's possibly one of many different things that we have as marketing tools as an island. And I don't think it excludes anything else. And I think when we talk with Visit Isle of Man and Locate, I think they really understand that it's one piece of a jigsaw, but it just underpins everything else that we're doing in such a perfect way, and actually ties in well with what we're doing anyway. I don't know why we wouldn't do it, I suppose, is where I would come from. But for people for whom UNESCO Biosphere Reserve status might not interest them, I think we can also package it up in our island story. So I would suggest that all of those things actually are happening anyway. But for me, the way that UNESCO Biosphere Reserve status is formulated really underpins everything we're doing anyway. And I think that's the weaving in through the island plan, weaving in through work that's happening across various agencies we have in enterprise, weaving in through the learning we're doing in education. It really just touches on everything.
You mentioned the business agencies there. Are all government departments on board for this? Because I know that questions just come in. Only 3 government departments have signed up according to the Biosphere website.
No, I did have a trawl through the website, and I did find all the government departments as partners, and I can confirm, even if they're not on the website, they definitely all are. Yeah. And not just on paper, because I take the point, and I think Jackie touched on earlier, we have had a situation where people have been able to just sign up, talk about one initiative, and have become partners. We now see that the next step of that is we really need to consolidate that work and make sure that those principles that underpin why you would be a partner to the Biosphere Reserve are values that you carry on as a business or an organisation throughout your time as a partner. That's a bigger piece of work, and there's a number of different opportunities as to how we might pursue that. And I think it works both ways. There are many, many business ideas and events that are happening across the island that absolutely tie in already with what we're doing, and sometimes we just don't know about them. And equally, there's things that we can share with businesses and organisations from our learning as a Biosphere Reserve. And I think that's why some of the work around networking, around creating spaces where people who have biosphere values underpinning their business propositions, being able to co-work at certain periods, they're all different initiatives that we want to build on to provide places where biosphere can really become a core thread that runs through everything that we're all trying to do.
In simple words, not mine, how do I, as a citizen of this country, go about my daily life and support biosphere objectives?
Well, it's just that thinking, it's very simply thinking about how you live in a sustainable way, and a way that considers the rest of nature, but also values our culture and heritage. So I don't think there's it's a bit of a wishy-washy answer. There's no one way to do it, because we're all different, just as all biosphere reserves are different. But it's really just thinking about, how do I live in the most sustainable way that I can with the resources that I have. So recognising that we're all at different stages of our sustainability journey, and we all have different resources available to us.
Do you see a major problem, Samantha says, for waste disposal management on the island to maintain our biosphere status? Do you see a conflict there?
So I think it's fair to say that there are a number of different areas that, both through the island plan, we've committed to prioritise, whether that be through sewage treatment, as you know, is a significant topic, and one that has been prioritised in the island plan. And we know that, you know, getting that right is really important around protecting our seas and our shores, but also making sure that we're looking at moving away from some of the old-fashioned ways of dealing with waste. You know, we've moved into a different world. There's a lot of work already ongoing around how DEFRA engage with DOI as the regulator for waste, and looking at how we handle our waste. But we also recognise, and I suppose this ties into that piece that, you know, for me, biosphere reserve status really acknowledges, is that we've got to find a way to get there. And you can't just click your fingers. I mean, I'm sure we all wish it was so, that we could just click our fingers and these things would be resolved. But we do have legacy issues, and we have to acknowledge them, we have to face up to them, and we have to create plans as to how we're going to deal with them. But that doesn't detract from us having a status. It's how we manage it and how we're demonstrating that we're aware of the issues and dealing with them.
And presumably this status rules out the exploitation of drilling for gas reserves in our territorial waters.
No, so again, all of it is around sustainable development. So it's about demonstrating through any initiative how mitigation is put in place for any environmental impact. And as I say, that's then how we utilise our planning system, making sure that marine protection, environmental protection, our ecosystems are tied into any decision making, rather than just giving carte blanche to any particular decision, or equally just saying no to any decision. It's got to be a far more considered process, which is absolutely what we're about.
What would your view on that be, Rachel? Just out of interest?
Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah, Jackie, in terms of exploitation in our territorial waters?
Same with the biosphere. The status doesn't say we can or can't do anything. So it is about, we do need to do things in a considered way, and we have to approach things considering all of the different aspects of the Biosphere Reserve. Okay,
we could have a whole panel discussion on that topic alone. You've waited very patiently, sir. The gentleman with a red T-shirt in the middle.
So I want to take a bit of a different angle towards this question, towards what's been said so far. I come from a mainly technical background, and I know Rachel has a few ideas around this and a project she's working on, but what can technology do to really help further our biosphere and make the future? Because technology, everyone says technology is the future. We've had the presentation about AI this morning. We have all these e-gaming companies over here. Everyone talks about technology, but how can technology help with the biosphere?
Well, I think that's a really interesting question, and something that people who are working in tech are the ones who truly know the answer. I think that they're the ones who are going to be able to see how tech can help us move forward and help us develop new technological ways to get around some of the things that we're doing at the moment that perhaps aren't so sustainable, and think of new ways for us to engage with each other and work together. And I think there's going to be a lot of positive things moving forward in the tech industry, and it'll come from those people who know it so well.
Jackie?
Yeah, and it's certainly not my area of expertise, but it is something that can sort of turbocharge the work that we're trying to do in the biosphere, and making sure that that kind of the AI and digital is informed by those sustainability values as well, and accommodates the biosphere thinking, but it can definitely turbocharge that fact of us being that innovation hub and really develop that research that we would like to do more of on island.
Thought-provoking questions. Thank you. You've been the best audience we've had all week, actually. In terms of one more from the floor, does anyone else wants to? Yes, and the lady at the back, I think closer to you there, June. Thank you very much. He's winging his way to you. Thank you.
I don't want to put a dampener on it, but ladies, you do seem to be in a rose-tinted bubble. Since the original accreditation, the agricultural sector is now on its knees, and yet there doesn't seem to be any acknowledgement of that or what the government is going to do about it.
Clare Barber.
So we've been working with the MNFU. I mean, this is separate, I would say, as from Biosphere, accepting that the MNFU and FWAG do sit on the Biosphere Stakeholder Partnership Group and have a huge amount of input, and in fact are fundamental. If you look at the amount of land that's managed by our farmers, they're absolutely fundamental and underpin the position that we hold in terms of being a UNESCO Biosphere Reserve status. But in terms of agriculture more generally, we have been working with the MNFU as DEFRA to build a new agriculture strategy. That's just in a finalised draft form now, running alongside a food security strategy, acknowledging some of the challenges that are being faced. And I think it's also fair to say we're not alone in facing some of those challenges, possibly going back to the Virtual Islands Summit, listening to the challenges faced by the other islands that we're both presenting and that we've conversed with subsequently. We're really not alone in terms of some of those challenges. And we've talked about some of the challenges in different presentations today, whether that be through cost of freight, cost of haulage, the ability to bring import products in and to export finished product, or whether that be through skills and making sure we've got people being supported in the right way. So it really is a number of different strands of work stream, but from a biosphere perspective, it's about working with and engaging with all of those different sectors. But I'd absolutely acknowledge that agriculture has a significant role to play in terms of our land management.
And also, as part of the periodic review, we'll be looking at where we have made progress and where we haven't, and part of it is acknowledging where we haven't, or where we've even maybe gone backwards, and how we can then look for the next 10 years to make progress on those areas as well. So it's not, we are in a strong position, and I do believe that, but there are going to be areas that we haven't performed as well and as others, and it gives us a real opportunity to look at those areas and to maybe refocus some efforts in those parts as well.
Follow-up question at all?
Well, have you got the funding to support the sector?
So part of the work around the agriculture strategy is looking at the funding that already exists for the sector and looking at whether we need to realign and look, reconsider, I suppose, where that's being pointed. Is it in the most appropriate ways? So there is, I suppose in every industry, we always say we could spend more money, but also we recognise that we're living in a world where we need to live within our means, and that's absolutely imperative.
We are out of time, but one succinct sentence from each of you as to what biosphere means. Jackie first.
That's quite a big ask, isn't it? It's everything. It's everything. It's literally everything that we live in and that we live from and that we live by. So that's probably it.
I think for me, biosphere is looking to the future and thinking about the future that we want to see, but also being inspired by our past and what makes us special about living on the Isle of Man and our heritage.
And Clare Barber?
Yeah, so I would just say it's putting in place the right building blocks to allow us to protect what we value from before and ensure that we're planning and protecting what we want for the future.
Thank you, Minister Clare Barber, Rachel Smith and Jackie Keenan. Thank you very much for your time. They are our final panel of the day. Thank you for your participation. That almost concludes the opening day of the Isle of Man Government Conference. Thank you for your thought-provoking questions as well on a variety of topics. The conference will resume at 8:30 tomorrow morning in here. The future public service delivery will be discussed. There'll be an update on the £4 billion project from the offshore wind developer Ørsted. There'll be a spotlight session on the safety and security of our island, just to name a few pointers, appointments worth making. Another action-packed day across the whole complex. And for those of you who are planning to be here fairly early at 8 a.m, again, courtesy of Marlborough Advisory, there will be a business breakfast sponsored by them. So thank you, a big thank you to them. It is now my pleasure to round up day one, to hand over to the Cabinet Office, Minister Kate Lord Brennan, who will deliver her closing address. Thank you.